Hi team, I thought I'd do a quick video on how I use Git on different machines and what I do to keep my sanity, trying to keep things consistent. So without going into a lot of detail, what you're looking at right now is my personal computer at home, and I've got a folder where I have my a folder where I put all my Git repositories, both my personal ones and other repos that I've cloned. And so on this machine, it's on the P drive. And as you can see, there's a lot of repos here. My personal work, which is a GitHub account you're familiar with, is in a folder CH Roads, and I'll come back to that. But you can see there's a big list of projects here. Now I'm going to drag over on top of the screen, just by way of contrast, my Git folder on my BD laptop. So I happen to have a folder on this machine on the C drive, and as you can see, it has fewer repos cloned. I mean, it's just a different computer, and there's nothing that says you have to clone the same repo on the same machine. But what I want to focus on is not all the other repos. I want to focus on just the repos in CH Roads. So you can see on my personal computer, which is on the right, and on the BD laptop, it looks like all the folders are the same. Looks like ExploreX is here. So once again, it's really not so much about the particular folders here, although I do tend to try to keep the same repos cloned on both machines, because sometimes I'm working on my laptop, BD laptop, sometimes I'm working on my personal machine. So what I want to focus on today is a repo called utilities. Go to that on both machines, and description views things that apply to all repositories. So what I want to do is I want to talk to you about the few files I have in this repo, which you can certainly clone. You know how to clone, just pull that down. Tell you how I use them and why I find them helpful. So first of all, and what I'm going to do now is to, well, actually I'm going to keep both windows open. So first of all, let's say I create a brand new repo on a machine. So I'm going to click here and say new folder, new repo. So in this repo, which right now, of course, is just a blank empty folder, you can do this from the command line. You can use Tortoise Git. So I'm going to do a create Git repository here, and this pops up. Do you want to make it bare? No, just go ahead. So we're going to click OK, initialize empty Git repo, and blah blah blah. So I'm going to go into this folder, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this up a bit, and as you can see, there's nothing in that folder. And I'm going to open back up the utilities folder. So right now there are no files in here other than the Git repository, and from the other training videos we kind of covered what's inside here, the actual pieces of information and objects, and then these different files and folders that you can, for the most part, just ignore, but it's really the magic of the Git repository. So I'm going to go back up to the working folder, and you'll notice it's completely empty, which is fine, but it's pretty typical in all Git repos to have at least one file, a git ignore, things that you want to be sure you don't accidentally check in, or things that you're not ready to check in. All sorts of different ways of using git ignore. Git attributes is another handy file. Editor config, how you want your editor to be configured by default, spaces, tabs, that kind of stuff. So one thing I typically do is I just grab from this utility folder those 3 files and I copy them in, so then I know that I'm at least starting in a consistent way. This is the quote way I like to work. So at this point, new repo doesn't exist anywhere than on this machine. So then the next question is, well, how are we going to get it over to this machine? Well, short of, having the machines know about each other, a pretty typical thing you'll do is you'll push this up to maybe GitHub, and then you'll clone it down over here. So there's a couple different ways of doing this. I'm going to show you. I've decided to not take on a challenge of learning something new, but just show you something that I know how to do and definitely works. So I'm going to go up to my GitHub account, and I'm going to click on repositories, and I click on new, and I'm going to create a new repository with a very clever name, new repo. So as new repos available, meaning I don't have any other new repos in chrodes. It's going to be public, and I'm going to go ahead and create it. Copy this, come back over to my, in this case, BD laptop, and I'm going to add those 3 files I just put in the working folder, because we know the first thing to do is to add files. This from the command line would be the git add command. And then I'm going to commit that. Add initial files. I'm going to commit and push. So I'm going to commit it to the local repo, and pushing, since it doesn't know, it hasn't been linked to any other remote repository, I'm going to paste in that URL from the repo we created up in GitHub. Remote name must not be empty. Oh, I think I'm supposed to put that here. There we go. Sorry. Don't do it this way too often. I typically start from GitHub and clone down, so I'm kind of demoing something. I don't do that often. So this is what's going on right now. It's pushing to that repo using branch master. Compressing objects, success. Okay. So now if we go back here and do a refresh, there are those 3 files. Okay. So that's kind of old news. Nothing too exciting about that. So what I'm going to do to kind of show you the other part of this, which is working across 2 machines, because what I've shown you so far is creating a repository locally and then copying these 3 config files. That's arguably the first thing I want to show you, and then pushing that up to GitHub. So we're going to come back to my desktop machine, and we're going to go up here, and since it's on the clipboard, I'm going to say git clone. That was on the clipboard, so we're going to go ahead and create this repository. Success. So now I have new repo on this machine, and I've got new repo on my BD laptop. So what is something typical that can happen? Well, let's say I'm working on my BD laptop. So I will new text document, new text document. Okay. Then I'm going to do the usual drill, TortoiseGit add, commit it, added new file, gonna commit and push it. Since it now has been linked to an origin. Oh, that's interesting. Well, that's no good. What does manage do? So I guess what you have to do is you have to paste it in here. Okay, well, there you go. That's how TortoiseGit does it. Okay, so now it knows about origin, so that should still work. It's probably very confusing to you. Click push. Okay, so that probably was a little bit confusing and not really the purpose of this lesson, but let's just go take this opportunity to see what happened behind the scenes. So in the Git repository, which normally you don't look in here at all, but we're going to go look at the config file because you may remember this from some of the training. The config file has a little bit of information in it, including how do you want your configuration, what kind of configuration stuff you want to do, and this is where you would put the link to your remote repository. So I'm looking at the file over here. This is something else I was doing, which kind of made me think, hey, I should share this with you guys. So it's saying the remote repository, that's the origin. I kind of consider GitHub as typically the origin. It doesn't have to be that way, but that's what I'm considering it. So new repo out in GitHub is considered the origin for my local repo. So this is what we just added when we clicked manage. So just so you know, and if you're interested, we can talk more about that. Okay, so we got this new text document, and if we come back to the repo, okay, well, we'll do a refresh, and sure enough, there's a new text document. Okay, so on my BD laptop C drive, we've got that new text document. So if we go into new repo on my desktop machine, of course the file isn't there. So this is now where I want you to start thinking about the second part. So a typical thing you would do, and whether you do it from the command line or from an add-on like TortoiseGit, is you might want to pull any changes that come from, GitHub, just to be sure you're up to date. So we'll click OK, and sure enough, it's pulled something down. So now if we go into new repo, new text document. So if you think about this a little bit, you'll probably start to see that depending on which machine you're working on, because sometimes you're working on one machine, sometimes you're working on another, you have to remember to push and pull to keep them in sync. Now, you always can do a git status command. So if we open up, just because I want to, I'm holding down the shift key and clicking on new repo, open PowerShell window here, covered in the original training classes. So I'm using that, this is not where I want to be. Now I understand why I got so many windows you didn't see that. CD new repo. So it says I'm on branch master. So if we do git st, remember the alias we created? It says I'm on master, git status, I think it's remote. Nope. Git status Okay, so I've opened up a PowerShell window in the new repo, and it says I'm on branch master. And if we do get st, the alias we created for get status with a little bit more, it says we're on master, everything's good. So let's edit that document. Hello, Jedi Order. We'll save that. Go back here, do get status, and it says, oh, we've got a modified document called new text document, and the stuff here indicates where we are in relationship to origin. So if we do commit, if we do get add new text document, get commit dash message updated doc, showing you from the command line now, get push, I think this is going to affect the config file again. So you know what, let's do this. Let's go back here and let's see what happens here. So I think what's happening is it's not understanding that the remote is the upstream for this. So let's do exactly what it says. Get push set upstream. So origin is upstream for master, and get push should probably come back and say now it's already up to date. Everything's up to date. But I'm going to click over here in Notepad++, and I think it's going to tell us that the file's out of date. So let me click here. Do you want to reload it? So look down at the bottom and you'll see some new lines appear. Yeah. So now what it said is our branch master is the origin of that is remote origin, and that's defined up here, and that's where it's getting its information inside the magic of the Git folder. So this file now matches this file, which is from a different repo, but now you kind of sort of understand that first we told it where the origin is, and now it's specifically understood what the branch master, how it relates to the repo origin. So there, got some more training in that we didn't even expect to do. Okay, so now going back to this, so we know that we've updated a file here. So if we go back to my desktop machine, and the screen, the windows on the right, of course, are going to go away because this is a remote desktop. So I'm going to click here. So we know this repo is out of date in relationship to the BD laptop and GitHub. So if I work here and if I don't remember to pull to be sure I get the latest document, because let me show you what's in here. Well, you can see it's got 0 bytes in it. So we know there's nothing in that file. So the challenge is, how do we remember to update a repo on a machine? And so that is the purpose of these other folders. Don't know why I made the machine window smaller. So we'll click down here on utilities, open a new window. Okay, and we'll go back here. And we'll click on C roads. So let me show you what Git status all repositories does, and then we'll look inside it. So I'm going to right click, run with PowerShell. Git st is not a command. Oh, so this is pretty interesting. This is the reason this is happening is I have not created the alias on this computer. So instead of taking the time to do that, I'm not going to do that. But what I'm going to do to kind of further to further emphasize this, I'm going to go to remote desktop on my desktop machine, and I'm going to remote into a virtual machine, which is really where I do all my development. Okay, so now we're on yet another machine, and it's probably got all sorts of junk here. So I'm going to go into a drive on this machine. So this has, well, it's actually mapped to the underlying machine, but let's not worry about that. So on this machine, which, like I just said, underneath the covers happens to use the same drive, but don't really pay too much attention to that. So right now, we are actually seeing VNC Dev 2020, which is a virtual machine running inside of this other machine. But it's seeing an underlying folder that's the same folder, which is the reason new repo is there. So don't let that confuse you. So I'm going to essentially do the thing I was just going to show you from here, because I'm pretty darn sure that on this machine I actually have the getST command, the alias, sorry, there. So I'm going to pull this down. Okay, so just pretend we were here the whole time. So I'm going to right click on this, run with PowerShell. And so what it's telling me, and it may not be obvious, but I'll walk you through it. It's telling me that applications folder is up to date, AZDO REST API Explorer, custom poolants, blah, 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 blah. Oh, Git training, there's something different. Question means I think it's not tracked. Office folder is different. So the important thing is it quickly tells me, oh, these are different. You might want to think about if they're different, why they're different. It looks like I modified the app config from this, some new files here. So it quickly tells me the status of all the different repos. So let's go see how it does that. So we'll edit this with Notepad. That PowerShell script, get status all repositories, has a little teeny function that prints out the delimiter. So let me move it over here. There. That's probably a good place for it. Okay. So this little function prints out the stars at the beginning and the end, the asterisks, if you will, and it writes it out using WriteHost in a foreground color and format. So the limit message just knows how to write that top line out. So here, if the computer name is, that's one of my machines or another machine, I know that my Git repo is on the P drive, so do that. Otherwise, and this is essentially when I'm on my BD laptop, this is where my Git repos are. So here's the list of repos I want to check status of. So it CDs to repo home. That's what we just said. And then for every repo in this list, it changes into that folder, prints out the message, and this is the punchline. It runs the getST command. My cat is crying. Hang on. Okay, cat fed. All things are good. So the output in red is essentially just the output from this PowerShell script. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up pull all repos. And I'm going to move it to the other view. And you can see these are basically identical PowerShell scripts. And I'm sure they're something subtly different. Now that one's got a comment character in, but it basically checks, what computer are you on? And in this case, it does a get status. And then over on the right, it does a get pull. It doesn't rebase anything. It pulls from remote origin into master. So you got to kind of be careful when you use this because you may have a different brand checked out or whatever. But kind of the default behavior if you're working on master is it's pretty safe to run this. So what I'm going to do now, we've already established that in new repo, new text document is empty. So if I run git pull all repos, it comes back and says, hey, that's already up to date, 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 boring, boring, boring. And you'll notice that everything is up to date, and I've forgotten to do a very important thing. So this is probably a perfect time to add this. So git pull all repositories, we have to add to this list. And I typically put the commas at the beginning of the line, so that way it's easier to comment them out. So new repo, and I'm not going to put it in get status because I'm going to take this out once I show you this, but save the file. So now if we run git pull all repositories, run with PowerShell, there we go. So it's pulled in the changes. I should let this stop scrolling before I try to point. Scroll back up. It's pulled in the changes right there from new document. So now you can see it's got something in it. We edit it with Notepad, and sure enough, hello Jedi Order. So what I do, or at least try to remember to do, is anytime I switch a machine, and this is what you've got to just discipline yourself to do, I come into the utility folder and I run git status to kind of get a sense of, oh, I've got some stuff here I haven't checked in or whatever, or hey, where am I in relationship to the remote repo? And then depending on what's going on, I'll do stuff, and then I'll either push all the repos up or I'll pull them all down. So those are the two things I wanted to attempt to cover. I wanted to show you how if you stand up a new repo, it's kind of handy to have configuration files that you start off in a known condition. And the three I found most typical that I always want to git ignore, but git attributes and editor config are handy. And then I use, so you remember what we did there is I copied these files up into the new repo, committed them, pushed them back and forth, and then I showed you these three PowerShell scripts to let you get the status of the repos that are in the PowerShell script. Obviously the list for your machine is going to be different, but I use these all the time. And as a final way of saying this, I work on my laptop, BD laptop, all during the week. I mean, of course, it's my job. I work there. I do things. And then Friday afternoon or evening, I figure out where I am, check everything in, push it up to GitHub by running git push, and then I shut my BD laptop off, and then I log on to one of my personal machines, and this is for things that are, personal and work related, or maybe I'm working on work on the weekend, and then I pull everything down to my desktop machine and then I work there. So I work on my desktop machine on the weekends, I work on the BD laptop during the week. So on Monday morning, what I do is on my desktop machine, Sunday night maybe, I commit and push everything up to GitHub. And then when I log into my BD laptop on Monday morning, I check the status, I pull everything down. So then I know, hey, everything I did over the weekend, I want to be sure I start with that, versus what used to happen is I'd start working on a different machine, but I would still think everything that I had done on the other machine was there. And then I forgot, my repo's out of sync with that other machine. And like I've already said, just from a process standpoint, I use GitHub as, the central repository, if you will, although we know that all Git repos are peers of each other. It's just a convention that you use. So I use GitHub as my, kind of master, not trying to use the word master as a branch, but, kind of the official place, and then I push and pull to it. Hope some of this was useful. Thanks for listening.